The doors hissed open, and every single head in that barracks turned toward me at once. And then the room went completely silent. The kind of silent where you can hear your own heartbeat. And I stood there holding my duffel bag like an idiot, while 40 armored alien women stared at me like I had just walked into the wrong universe. My name is Daniel Hargrove, and 3 days earlier I had been a bored logistics technician trying to swap a weekend shift so I could catch some sleep. That is the whole reason I am standing here right now, sweating through my uniform, wondering if I am about to be arrested, married, or killed. Possibly all three in that order. Let me back up, because none of this makes sense unless you understand how bad our translation software really was on that outpost. I worked on a joint research and supply station called Kessend Point, one of those places humans and a species called the Velkari shared under some old trade agreement nobody in my pay grade ever bothered to read. The Velkari were tall, broad-shouldered, and built like they lifted small moons for fun. Their culture ran almost entirely through women in positions of authority, which nobody on the human side thought twice about, because frankly, most of us barely understood their language, their customs, or their paperwork. That paperwork is where everything went wrong. I had pulled 2 weekend duty shifts in a row, and I wanted out of a third, so I found a public terminal near the mess hall that let you request shift transfers. Except that terminal was not ours. It belonged to a recruitment kiosk the Velkari had installed for their own personnel, and our translation software had apparently decided, without asking anyone, that it could also translate their forms for us. I tapped through 4 screens of alien text rendered in shaky, half-broken English. I remember thinking the wording was strange, something about honor and service and lifetime commitment, but I figured that was just a clumsy translation of a scheduling waiver. There was a box near the bottom that I assumed meant opt out of gym fee, so I checked it, pressed my thumb on the scanner when it asked for confirmation, and walked away feeling very pleased with myself. 2 days later, a transfer order showed up in my inbox with my name on it, stamped with a seal I did not recognize, written in a language I could not read, attached to a physical bag they wanted me to pack immediately. I assumed it was a mistake. I walked into the administration office expecting someone to laugh, hand me an apology, and send me back to my normal boring life. Instead, a Velkari officer named Kessa Marrow looked at my file, looked at me, and told me, in perfectly clear English, that I had been accepted into the Sisterhood Combat Corps, and that my enlistment was already binding under their oldest laws. I laughed. I actually laughed out loud, right in her face, because I thought it was some kind of joke or hazing ritual for new station staff. She did not laugh back. She told me that the Sisterhood Combat Corps was not a scheduling department. It was an elite military order that had existed for over 1,000 years, made entirely of women, trained from childhood in some of the harshest conditions their homeworld could offer, and that no outsider, let alone a man, had ever been accepted into its ranks before. I told her there had clearly been a mistake with the translation software. She told me that under Velkari law, once a thumbprint confirms an enlistment, only a formal trial of worth can undo it, and that trial would not happen for another 6 months, because the reviewing council was currently off-world. That is how I ended up standing in front of that barracks door with my duffel bag, about to become the first man in 1,000 years of Velkari history to join the Sisterhood, entirely by accident, because I wanted an extra day off. The doors slid open, and the silence hit me like a wall. Rows of bunks stretched out on either side, and every single soldier in that room had stopped whatever she was doing to look at me. Some were mid-stretch, frozen with one leg still raised. Some had weapons half disassembled in their hands. A few had just come out of the wash area and were still dripping, not caring in the slightest, because staring at me was clearly more important than finishing what they were doing. Nobody said a word. I could hear the hum of the ventilation system and nothing else. Finally, a woman near the back set down the equipment she had been holding and walked toward me slowly, like she was approaching something that might bite. She was easily a head taller than me, with silver markings across her jaw that I would later learn meant she held the rank of first sergeant. Her name, I would soon find out, was Threya Vask, and she had exactly 0 patience for what she assumed was some kind of insult. She asked me, in a voice low enough that the whole barracks probably still heard every word, whether this was a joke arranged by the human command, some attempt to mock the sisterhood's traditions. I told her it was not a joke. I told her about the terminal, the mistranslated form, the thumbprint scanner, the checkbox I thought meant something about gym fees. I explained it as clearly and as honestly as I could, because at that point, lying seemed like the fastest way to get myself hurt. Threya studied me for a long moment. Then she turned to the rest of the barracks and said something in Velkari that made half the room let out a noise that was somewhere between a laugh and a groan of disbelief. She turned back to me and said that human bureaucracy was apparently more dangerous than anything they trained for, because at least an enemy soldier announces themselves with a weapon, not a badly translated shift request form. That got an actual laugh from a few of the soldiers near the front, which honestly felt like the first good sign I had gotten all day. Threya told me that since the law required a formal trial before my enlistment could be undone, and that trial was months away, I would train alongside the unit in the meantime. She made it very clear this was not a favor. If I was going to occupy a bunk in her barracks, I was going to earn my place the same way every other soldier had. I told her that sounded fair, mostly because I did not see any other option that did not involve angering an entire barracks of women who could probably break me in half without much effort. The first week nearly did break me, though not in the way I expected. Velkari training began before sunrise, with a run around the perimeter of the compound, 6 full laps over uneven ground, followed by strength drills that used equipment clearly built for bodies twice as strong as mine. I fell behind almost immediately. My legs burned in ways I did not know legs could burn. Several soldiers slowed down just enough to watch me struggle, not out of cruelty exactly, more out of pure curiosity, the way you might watch an animal do something unexpected. What surprised them, and honestly surprised me too, was that I kept going. I was not fast. I was not strong by their standards, but something in the way humans are built means we do not always know when to quit, and I finished every single lap, every single day, even when my legs felt like they belonged to someone else. By the end of the first week, Threya noticed. She did not say anything kind about it, but she stopped assigning someone to watch me finish last, which in her world was apparently a form of respect. The second week introduced sparring drills, and this is where things got interesting for a different reason entirely. Velkari combat training relied heavily on brute strength and disciplined formation tactics, techniques passed down for generations with very little deviation. My body simply could not compete on those terms, so instead, without really planning to, I started improvising. When a soldier named Farron Dask came at me with a textbook grappling technique, I ducked sideways instead of blocking, using her own momentum to send her stumbling past me. It was not skill exactly, it was closer to desperation dressed up as a strategy. The room went quiet again, though this time it felt different from that first silence at the door. This silence had a kind of tension in it, like everyone was recalculating something. Farron picked herself up, stared at me for a moment, then actually smiled, which I had not expected at all. She told me that no opponent had ever broken her stance like that before, and she wanted to know where I learned it. I told her the truth, which was that I made it up on the spot because I was terrified of getting hurt. That answer seemed to fascinate her more than any actual technique could have. Word spread through the barracks quickly after that. The strange, weak-looking human man, who somehow refused to fall over, who fought without any of their formal training, who solved problems by simply refusing to follow the expected pattern. A few days later, during a tactical exercise designed to test squad coordination under pressure, our unit was given an impossible scenario. We had to move a wounded teammate across an open field, while enemy positions, simulated by targeting drones, tracked and marked anyone caught in open ground. Every Velkari soldier approached it, the way their doctrine taught them, in tight formation, moving as one coordinated unit, which made them an easy, predictable target for the drones. I suggested something different. I suggested splitting into smaller groups, moving in bursts, using confusion instead of formation. It went against everything they had been trained to do, and Threya looked at me like I had suggested something close to treason. She let us try it anyway, mostly, I think, because she wanted to prove me wrong. It worked. Not perfectly, but well enough that we finished the exercise faster than any other squad that week, and well enough that Threya stood in front of the group afterward and admitted, through gritted teeth, that the human's idea had merit. That single sentence changed something in how the barracks treated me. I was still an outsider. I was still, as far as anyone could tell, the only man to ever wear that uniform. But the stares in the hallway started feeling less like suspicion and more like curiosity. And once, a young soldier named Nira Voss asked me directly whether all humans thought like that, sideways, unpredictable, refusing to follow the obvious path. I told her I honestly did not know, because I had never really thought about it before meeting them. The weeks kept moving forward, and so did the trials. There was an endurance test that involved carrying weighted packs through a flooded section of terrain for an entire day. No rest, no shortcuts. 2 soldiers dropped out from exhaustion. I did not finish first, not even close. But I finished, soaked, shaking, barely able to stand, and Threya was waiting at the end line with an expression I still cannot fully describe, somewhere between disbelief and something close to approval. There was a night exercise where we had to navigate a dark structure using only sound and memory. No light sources allowed. My eyes were useless in that kind of darkness compared to theirs, but somehow my instinct to move slowly and carefully, rather than rushing forward the way their training encouraged, meant I avoided the traps that caught 3 other soldiers off guard. Each time, the barracks reacted the same way. A moment of silence, then a slow, grudging respect that grew a little louder each time. The turning point came during what they called a final measure exercise, a simulated confrontation meant to test how a soldier handled overwhelming pressure without breaking. I was paired against Threya herself, which felt less like an honor and more like a punishment. She came at me hard, testing every weakness she had watched me expose over the past weeks. I lost ground almost immediately. My arms ached, my breathing turned ragged, and for a moment, I genuinely believed I was about to fail in front of the entire barracks. Instead of matching her strength, which was impossible, I leaned into something uniquely human, a strange, nervous joke that slipped out of my mouth without permission. I told her that if she kept holding back like this, I was going to start thinking she liked me. The room froze for half a second. Threya froze too, just long enough for her grip to loosen, just long enough for me to slip free and reset my footing. She did not find the joke funny exactly, but something about it threw off her rhythm in a way none of her training had prepared her for. We finished the exercise almost evenly matched, which by every measure of the trial should have been impossible. Afterward, breathing hard, she looked at me and said that humans fought strangely, using words as weapons the same way they used their bodies, refusing every rule that was supposed to define a real soldier. I told her that where I came from, that was usually called personality, not strategy. She almost smiled, almost. From that point forward, something shifted in how the entire barracks treated me. I was still teased constantly, still corrected on formation drills I never fully mastered, still reminded daily that I was, and would probably always be, the strangest recruit in the history of the sisterhood. But it stopped feeling like suspicion. It started feeling like belonging. A soldier named Elira Bren, one of the quietest members of the unit, sat beside me one evening while we cleaned equipment and asked if it was true that all human men were like me. I told her that I was, by most standards back home, extremely ordinary, which made her laugh so hard she nearly dropped the equipment in her hands. She said that if I was ordinary, she genuinely did not want to meet whatever humans considered exceptional. Eventually, the review council returned from off-world, and the trial of worth I had been waiting for, the one meant to formally undo my accidental enlistment, was finally scheduled. By that point, something strange had happened inside me. I no longer wanted it undone. I stood in front of the council, a group of older, deeply serious Velkari officers who had clearly heard the entire ridiculous story of the mistranslated form and the checkbox and the thumbprint scanner. They asked me directly whether I wished to formally void my enlistment, now that the option was finally available. I looked around the room, at Threya standing near the back with her arms crossed, at Farron and Nira and Elira watching quietly from the side, all of them people who had spent months testing me, doubting me, and slowly, reluctantly, accepting me anyway. I told the council that I would like to remain. The room went silent again, but this time it was a different kind of silence, the kind that comes right before something changes for good. Then Threya, of all people, stepped forward and formally vouched for me, stating that despite every unconventional, rule-breaking, strange method I brought into their training, I had proven myself capable of standing beside the sisterhood as a genuine soldier, not a mascot, not an accident, but someone who belonged in their ranks. The council accepted her recommendation, and just like that, an enlistment that began because I misunderstood a scheduling form on a public terminal became something permanent, something real, something I never expected to want in the first place. A few weeks later, I received a message from Human Command back on Earth, asking why my personnel file had suddenly been updated to list me under an unfamiliar alien military organization, with a rank listed simply as Initiate. They wanted an explanation, in writing, as soon as possible. I sat there for a long time, trying to figure out how to explain that I had accidentally joined a 1,000-year-old alien combat order because I wanted an extra day off work, and that somewhere along the way, without meaning to, I had actually become one of them. In the end, I typed a short reply, telling them that it was a long story, that I would explain everything in detail during my next leave, and that in the meantime, they should probably stop routing translation software through outdated alien recruitment terminals, because apparently, that is exactly how legends get started. I hit send, closed the message, and walked back out toward the barracks, where the sound of morning drills was already beginning, loud and steady, and for the first time since I arrived, completely familiar.